She grew up going to Mass every Sunday. She confessed her smallest sins to a priest who was likely carrying secrets far heavier than hers. She was told her body was a temple, but then she was handed zero instructions on what to do with it when someone wants to visit. The result is a generation of Filipinos who are deeply, privately curious about intimacy, yet completely unable to put words to it. Not with their doctors, not with their mothers, and this is where it hits you, not even with you. As a foreign man, you are navigating an emotional landscape without a map or a manual. What you might misread as disinterest or boredom is often just a 20-year-old theology still running quietly in the background, keeping her silent. Hi guys, it's Dee and welcome back to the channel. If the closest thing your Filipino girlfriend ever got to sex education was a priest telling her to save herself, and now you're confused why she goes quiet in the bedroom, this video exists for you. Subscribe because that's the gap I fill. If you want the conversation I won't put on YouTube, Patreon is where those live. Monthly exclusives, real talk, no algorithm pressure. Channel members get early access and links are below. Today we're going somewhere most channels won't, and it's the intersection of Catholic guilt, sexual silence, and what it actually does to intimacy in Filipino relationships. And no, I am not here to shame anyone, I am here to explain what's actually happening. The Philippines is the only country in Asia and one of the very few in the world, I think just along with the Vatican City, where divorce remains illegal, and as of 2024, the House has passed a divorce bill, but it hasn't cleared the Senate, and marriage in the Philippine legal and cultural framework is still treated as insoluble. And that's a theology embedded so deep into civil life, and it reshapes how Filipinos understands relationships, bodies, and what happens between consenting adults behind closed doors. The Catholic Church ran Philippine education for over 300 years under Spanish colonial rule, and when the Americans arrived in 1898 and introduced public schooling, they didn't dismantle the moral framework, but they worked alongside it. So the result is a society where the Church's position on sex outside marriage, on contraception, on intimate expression, even inside marriage, has been absorbed as social identity rather than just religious doctrine. So you don't just break a rule at that point. Instead, you become a bad person. And what that produces is a culture where sex is simultaneously everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The innuendo in Filipino comedy is legendary. The soap operas are drenched in romantic tension. The music is wall-to-wall longing, but the moment the topic becomes direct, clinical, practical, honest, the room goes silent and someone changes the subject. To note, the Philippines has one of the highest teenage pregnancy rates in Southeast Asia. And according to the Philippine Statistics Authority, roughly 53 Filipino teenagers give birth every single day. And that is not a statistic about a sexually inactive population. That is a statistic about a sexually active population with no education, no access, and no language for any of it. And the 2022 Young Adult Fertility and Sexuality Study found that premarital sex among Filipino youth has been rising steadily for decades, quietly without any corresponding rise in honest conversation about it. Everyone is doing it, but nobody is talking about it, and the gap between those realities is where the damage lives. So, a 2022 study published in the Philippine Journal of Reproductive Health found that a majority of Filipino adolescents cited parents and teachers as their least preferred sources of sexual health information. The most common source was friends, and relevant to where this video is going, internet pornography. The silence isn't absence of curiosity, apparently. It's presence of shame layered over a subject that never stopped mattering. Now let's talk about the Philippines pornography problem. Because when a society refuses to talk about sex, honestly, people don't stop being curious, they go underground. And in the Philippines, underground now means a smartphone and a Wi Fi connection. The Philippines consistently ranks in the top 15 countries worldwide on Pornhub's annual traffic reports. Think about that in context. This is a country where buying a condom at a pharmacy can feel like a public confession, where asking a doctor about a contraception requires more courage than most people have on a regular Tuesday, where the word sex itself gets swallowed mid sentence in polite company. And yet, the traffic number tells a completely different story about what is actually happening on people's screens when nobody is watching. And the gap between public performance and private behavior is not a small one either. It is a defining feature of how the Philippines relates to sexuality, and it has consequences that show up in real relationships with real people. The real damage is in the education vacuum pornography fills. Pornography is scripted. It is a performance designed around a camera angle, and the bodies are selected, the reactions are exaggerated, the dynamics are built for visual impact and not human connection. When it becomes someone's primary or only model for what sex looks like, what pleasure looks like, what their role is supposed to be, the results are quietly harmful in ways that takes years to surface inside a relationship. For Filipinos who grew up in households where sex was never named, let alone discussed, porn doesn't fill an information gap. It fills an emotional and relational gap, and it answers questions that should have been answered by a parent, a teacher, a trusted adult, and the answer it gives are sex is performance, women are passive or performing, men lead and women accommodate, and discomfort or disconnection is normal. This is why some Filipinas are, and I'll just say this plainly because it needs to be said, absent in the bedroom, or that they suck in the bedroom, or just never initiate. Not because they lack attraction to their partner, not because desire isn't there, but because nobody ever told them they were allowed to have desires. And the only model they had for what sex looks like told them that their job was to accommodating someone else's. And this is the predictable output of a system that withholds information and then acts surprised when people don't know things. Now let's talk about what you usually misread and why, because this is where foreign men in relationships with Filipinas most often get wrong, and it's usually not out of bad intentions but out of missing context. Pattern 1 is that she seems reluctant, but once they're in the moment, she's fine. He interprets this as shyness and or old-fashionedness, and the reluctance usually is real, but the source is worth understanding, because in her framework, initiating is coded as aggressive, unfeminine, and even shameless. She was taught through every novena, every good girl standard set by her lola or grandmother, every quiet correction her mother made, that women who want sex openly are women men don't respect. So she waits, she accommodates, and she doesn't ask for what she wants because wanting it openly feels like a transgression she has warned about her entire life. Pattern 2 is she's quiet during sex. He wonders if she's present. She's performing a role she was never taught to inhabit authentically, and she's doing it from a slight distance, watching herself rather than being inside the experience. And this is what happens when intimacy was never modeled as a space where she has a voice or a right to one. Pattern 3 is she's uncomfortable with physical affection outside the bedroom. Public affection, prolonged kissing, long hugs in front of the family. He reads this as a cultural modesty, and it is partly. The body in a Catholic formation is something to be managed and covered. Pleasure is private and suspect, and affection that is visible invites a judgment. She's internalized long before he arrived, and she's protecting both of them from a gaze she can't quite turn off. And then there is the contraception conversation, or more accurately, the absence of one. Many foreigners are caught off guard by how difficult it is for their Filipino partner to engage with this conversation or topic practically. Going to a pharmacy to buy condoms or contraceptive pills in the Philippines carries a specific social weight that has no equivalent in most Western countries. It is an act that announces what you're doing and who you're doing it with in a public space to a pharmacist who may know your family in a community where reputation travels, and a 2019 Commission on Population and Development report found that unmet need for family planning in the Philippines remains among the highest in Southeast Asia, with many women citing embarrassment and social stigma as primary barriers to access. The shame is structural and it is baked into the experience of trying to take care of yourself. None of this means she's damaged or unavailable, It means she was shaped by something powerful he didn't share, and the gap between them is real and deserves honest conversations, not workarounds. Now let's talk about the part that confuses foreign men most because it looks like contradiction. The same woman who won't say the word sex out loud in conversation, who deflects with laughter when the topic comes up, who crosses herself after a dirty joke, she may also be extremely comfortable watching teleseries with explicit storylines, forwarding risque memes to her friends, or running a frankly chaotic private messenger thread with her friends that would make her priest faint. And here's the raw truth of it. The Philippines is one of the most sexually active countries in the region, and almost none of that activity happens in the open. A 2023 global survey by Durex ranked the Philippines among the most sexually active populations in Asia, and premarital sex is widespread across all classes, all regions, all levels of religious observance. And the devout go to Mass on Sunday and sleep with their partners on Saturday or Monday. And the college student who posts Bible verses on Instagram are also the ones in the group chat talking about things their parents would not survive reading. The gap between the public identity of a God-fearing conservative Catholic nation and the private reality of what people are actually doing is enormous, and everyone quietly knows it and nobody says it out loud. Well, I think I just did. This is compartmentalization, the cognitive architecture of a shame-based culture built to survive itself. You perform the public standard, you live the private reality, and the gap between them is never examined because examining it would require a kind of honesty the culture actively discourages. Now, layer onto that the single mother reality, because the Philippines has one of the highest rates of solo parents in Southeast Asia, and according to the 2020 census, there are approximately 14.4 million solo parents in the country, the overwhelming majority of them women. These are not women who are obviously not sexually active. These are women who are sexually active in a country where contraception is embarrassing to access, abortion is illegal under almost all circumstances under the revised penal code, and the man who got them pregnant faced essentially zero structural accountability. And the outcome of all of that silence is not abstinence. The outcome is single mothers, teenage pregnancies, and children raised without fathers, while the church that created the conditions continues to oppose the very contraception that would have changed the math. The practical consequence inside a relationship is that she may be capable of far more intimacy, humor, and openness than she has ever shown him. Unlocking that requires trust, time, and the clear absence of judgment. She needs to know that what happens between them will never be measured against the public standard she has spent her whole life performing to. A 2021 survey by Likhaan Center for Women's Health, one of the Philippines' leading reproductive rights organizations, found that fewer than 30% of Filipino women reported receiving comprehensive sex education from any formal source, and over 60% said they wished they had access to more accurate information about their own bodies and sexual health. And these women are not ignorant, okay? They are unprepared, and the difference matters in how you approach the conversation. Now, let's talk about what actually helps in this situation, and I'm gonna tell you that this is not a fix-it guide. There is no technique that fast forwards past years of formation. There are things, though, that make a genuine difference. Stop making the bedroom the only place where honesty happens, Couples who can talk about intimacy outside the bedroom, casually, without agenda, without pressure, build the vocabulary for conversations that are much harder to have in the moment. And this matters especially when she was raised in silence on the subject. And the conversation doesn't have to be clinical. It can be oblique at first. It can be a question, it can be a check in after rather than during. And the goal is to establish that the topic is safe. Second is understand the difference between reluctance and refusal. Consistent withdrawal, disengagement, tolerating rather than participating, that deserves a real conversation, and a quiet, non pressured check in where she knows she can say something true without it becoming a crisis is important. Third is that the contraception conversation is worth having directly, practically, and without making her carry it alone. If she has never walked into a pharmacy and bought contraception without feeling like she was being watched and judged, she may be doing reproductive math that he doesn't know she's doing, taking that weight off the table, being the one who handles it, being matter of fact about it, removes a barrier that shame built and that she may not have the language to name. And if you're building a long term relationship with a Filipina, at some point you will encounter the Catholic framework directly. Maybe she wants a church wedding, maybe she has complicated feelings about contraception. Maybe she goes quiet around certain subjects in ways that seem disproportionate to the moment. The productive response is understanding the framework well enough to work with it honestly. Respecting the weight it carries for her doesn't require sharing her faith. And the thing that seems smallest but changes everything is that tell her what you like and ask her what she likes. Many Filipinas have never been asked. Many have never received the message that their experience of intimacy matters, and not just his. That shift in the framing can move things that years of patience haven't touched. The Catholic Church has been operating in the Philippines since 1565. Over 450 years of moral formation, and you are not undoing it in a relationship conversation over dinner, and you're also not helpless in the face of it. What you're dealing with is a woman who was taught that her body is a liability, that desire is dangerous, and that good women stay quiet about what they want. A country that is quietly, behind closed doors, one of the most sexually active in Asia, while publicly performing a modesty it largely abandoned in practice generations ago. And she's living inside that contradiction every day, often without the language to describe it. The least you can do is understand what she's been carrying before you decide what the silence means. If this video gave you something you didn't have before, please subscribe. It's free and it tells YouTube to keep putting this content in front of people who need it. For the conversations I don't put on YouTube, Patreon is the place. Please give this video a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Dee, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye! That gap, it is the defining texture feature. The real damage, the real